Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into something that really kind of got me thinking when I saw it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's this YouTube video called Climate Change May Be a Good Thing. Yeah, and it's by this guy named Mr. Reagan.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and we're going to be looking at this whole idea of global greening and kind of unpacking the claims in this video about whether rising CO2 levels could actually be good for plant life.
So, like, benefiting the Earth.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild stuff.
So he's saying climate change is a good thing.
Well, he's saying that there might be some good that comes out of it.
But
It's not all doom and gloom like we always hear, right?
right.
So the video jumps right into this concept of global greening, which is basically the idea that as CO2 levels go up, plants actually grow more.
Oh, okay. So more CO2, more plants.
Exactly. And Mr. Reagan, this YouTuber, he's saying that CO2 is like the main driver behind this whole global greening thing.
So is he saying, like, we need more CO2?
Well, he actually suggests that maybe we should be pumping out even more CO2. Wow.
I know it sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But he's trying to make the case that it could actually accelerate this greening effect and be beneficial in the long run.
That's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what evidence he has to back that up.
Yeah, me too. Well, one of the things he brings up is this NASA study from 2016.
NASA.
Yeah, and it found like significant greening across something like half of the Earth's vegetated land.
Wow.
Yeah, over the past 35 years.
That's huge.
It is. He says it's an area twice the size of the continental United States.
Wow. So like all this new plant growth is happening.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the study does mention other factors too, of course, like nitrogen and climate change itself.
Right. Those are definitely part of the picture.
Yeah, but they attribute a whopping 70% of this greening effect to rising CO2 levels.
70%, that's a majority of it.
Right. And one of the study's authors even said, we see what an outsized role CO2 plays in the process.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. What if they're right? What if increased CO2 really does have a big positive impact on plants? Like, what would that mean for how we approach climate change?
That's a great question, and it's not one we usually hear asked.
Yeah.
We're always focused on the negative side of CO2.
Exactly. So to hear that it might actually be helping plants thrive is pretty mind-blowing.
It is. It really challenges that whole doomsday narrative that we're so used to hearing.
Right, and that's something Mr. Reagan really emphasizes in the video. He's arguing that this constant focus on climate catastrophe might actually be distracting us from other problems.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he says we're spending trillions of dollars on these climate initiatives and not really seeing much of a difference. And he even goes so far as to suggest that some of these interventions might be doing more harm than good.
Now, that's a controversial statement. Is there any evidence to support that?
Well, that's a tough question to answer.
Yeah.
It's really complicated, right? Like, there have been some positive developments, like, the growth of renewable energy and stuff. But it's also true that progress has been slower in some areas than people hoped for.
Yeah, I could see that.
And there are definitely concerns about, unintended consequences of some of these interventions. Like, for example, the impact of biofuel production on food prices.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's been a big issue.
Yeah, so it's not as simple as saying all climate action is bad or ineffective.
Right. There are definitely a lot of factors to consider.
Yeah, but Mr. Reagan, he seems pretty skeptical of, like, government-funded climate science in general. He kind of implies that scientists don't really understand the full picture when it comes to climate change.
That's a pretty bold claim, too.
Yeah, and then he goes on to suggest this whole theory about financial incentives driving this climate alarmism.
Financial incentives, like what does he mean?
Well, he actually uses the term financial grift.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's basically saying that there are these investment firms like BlackRock,
Okay.
and they're profiting off of climate change fears.
How does that work?
So he's claiming that these firms are investing heavily in renewable energy companies.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess.
Right, but then they're also lobbying governments to support those same companies.
So they're kind of creating their own market.
Exactly. They're using taxpayer money to create this artificial demand for renewable energy, which drives up the value of their investments and leads to huge profits for them.
So he's saying it's all about money, not about saving the planet.
Yeah, that's his argument. He believes that politicians are exploiting public fear of climate change to get rich.
Wow.
And he even uses the example of Iceland's reforestation efforts as a potential positive side effect of climate change.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's claiming that warmer temperatures are actually helping those efforts along.
So he's saying that even if we accept that global greening is happening and it's having a positive impact, should that change how we think about climate change?
Exactly. It's a really different way of looking at things.
It is. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about climate change.
Yeah. It does. We've got a lot to unpack here. This video is definitely challenging the conventional narrative and raising some important questions about why we're doing what we're doing when it comes to climate change.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
It does, and we're just getting started.
It really does make you think, and this whole idea of a financial grift is pretty wild.
Yeah, he really goes after these investment firms like BlackRock, saying that they're manipulating everything.
Yeah, he makes them sound like the bad guys.
He does. He's saying they're basically controlling the narrative and even influencing government policy just to make themselves richer.
So he's saying they're investing in renewable energy, but only because they know they can make a ton of money off of it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. He's describing it as this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where they invest in these companies, then lobby the government to support them and create this artificial demand.
So they're making it seem like renewable energy is the only solution, even if it's not.
Right, and all the while they're just getting richer and richer.
It's kind of cynical, but I can see where he's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, investing in renewable energy does sound like a good thing on the surface, right?
It does. I mean, everyone's talking about how we need to transition to cleaner energy.
Exactly. So it's like, are these companies really just in it for the money, or are they actually trying to help the planet?
It's hard to say for sure. I guess it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah, maybe. But Mr. Reagan, he argues that this whole focus on profit is distracting us from the real solutions.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he says governments are just throwing money at these Band-Aid solutions that aren't really addressing the root of the problem.
And he's worried about the potential downsides of those interventions too, right?
Yeah, he brings up geoengineering.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other can of worms.
It is. He's basically saying that trying to manipulate the climate through these large-scale technological interventions is super risky and could have unintended consequences.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, we don't really know how messing with the Earth's systems on that level would play out in the long run.
Right. And even among scientists, there's a lot of debate about geoengineering.
Yeah, some people think it's like our last hope, but others think it's way too dangerous.
Exactly. And Mr. Reagan, he argues that this uncertainty is being ignored in this rush to find a quick fix for climate change.
So he thinks we're jumping the gun without really thinking it through.
Yeah. And he also brings up the potential for these technologies to be used for, like, political gain or even military purposes.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about the environment then.
Right. It's about who has the power to control these technologies and how they might use them.
That's a whole other ethical dilemma.
It is. So even if we put aside this whole financial grift thing for a minute, what about the main argument of the video?
Right. The global greening thing.
Yeah. Is it possible that increased CO2 could actually be a good thing for the planet?
He does bring up that example of Iceland's reforestation efforts.
Right. He's claiming that warmer temperatures might actually be helping those trees grow faster.
So even if we accept that global greening is happening, are there potential downsides that we need to consider?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, more plants sound like a good thing, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. But it could lead to changes in ecosystems that aren't necessarily beneficial.
Oh, like what?
Well, for example, certain plant species might start growing like crazy and outcompete other species.
Oh, so it could actually reduce biodiversity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have to remember that climate change is a lot more complicated than just CO2 levels.
Right. There's rise in temperatures, change in weather patterns, and all sorts of other stuff happening.
Yeah, it's not as simple as saying more CO2 equals more plants equals a happy planet.
Definitely not. So while this video is making a case for the potential benefits of increased CO2, it seems like there's still a lot we don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely more to the story.
There is. And I think that's what makes this whole topic so fascinating.
Yeah, it really does make you think about how much information is out there about climate change. You know?
It does, and it can be tough to figure out what to believe.
Exactly, especially when you've got all these financial interests potentially muddying the waters.
It's true, and I think it's easy to get caught up in looking for like a simple solution or explanation. Yeah, we all want things to be black and white, right?
Right, but as we've seen with this deep dive, the reality is way more complicated than that.
It is. So where does that leave us? Like, what are we supposed to take away from all of this?
Well, I think the big thing is to approach any information about climate change with a healthy dose of skepticism.
So not just blindly believe in everything you hear.
Exactly. Whether it's from a YouTube video, a scientific study, or a news article, you always want to be asking questions.
Right. Like, is this really true?
Yeah, and looking for evidence to support the claims that are being made.
And thinking about who's saying it right.
Exactly. You got to consider the source.
Yeah.
Like, who funded the research? Do they have any biases? Are there other perspectives that aren't being presented?
It's like that whole financial grift thing Mr. Reagan was talking about.
Yeah.
Even if we can't prove it's happening, it's still kind of unsettling.
It is. It makes you wonder about who you can trust.
Right. And it also highlights how important it is to have different voices in the conversation about climate change.
Absolutely. We need to be hearing from everyone, not just the people with the most money or the loudest voices.
So scientists, economists, policymakers, indigenous communities, everyday people.
Exactly. Everyone who's impacted by climate change needs to have a seat at the table.
And maybe by doing that, we can come up with solutions that actually work for everyone.
That's the goal, right?
It is. So even though this YouTube video was kind of out there, it's made us think about climate change in a whole new way.
Yeah, it has. And I think that's a good thing.
It is. It's a reminder that we should never stop questioning things and that there's always more to learn.
Absolutely. And if we can keep an open mind and keep the conversation going,
Yeah.
maybe we can figure this whole climate change thing out.
Yeah, maybe. All right, folks, that's it for our deep dive this week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.